The morning my mother-in-law threw my newborn daughter's crib into the trash, the sun was shining like nothing cruel could ever happen beneath it. I was standing in a dusty National Guard training yard, sweat running down my back, when my phone lit up with a picture that made my knees nearly give out. There, beside the garbage bins behind our apartment building, was the white wooden crib I had built with my own hands, the same crib my baby had slept in the night before. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of parents who keep going when life breaks them, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Silent Dad Stories. Your support helps stories like this reach someone who may need hope today. My name is Callum Reyes, and at the time, I was 27 years old, serving part-time in the National Guard while working nights at a warehouse to support my wife, Marin, and our 3-week-old daughter, Sienna. We were not rich. We were not even comfortable. But that little crib had meant everything to us. I had sanded it in the parking lot during my lunch breaks, painted it soft ivory under the afternoon sun, and tightened every screw like I was building a promise. To me, that crib was not furniture. It was proof that even a tired man with blistered hands could make a safe place for his child. Marin's mother, Odette Vale, had moved in with us after Sienna was born, though moved in was not exactly the right phrase. She arrived with 3 suitcases, a cold smile, and the habit of making every room feel smaller. She had never liked me. She thought Marin had married beneath her, thought my uniform was an excuse for absence, thought my warehouse job was proof I lacked ambition. Every mistake I made became evidence in a case she had been building since the wedding. I tried to be respectful because she was Marin's mother, but respect is difficult when someone keeps stepping on the softest parts of your life. That Saturday was drill day, and it was bright from the very beginning. I kissed Sienna's warm forehead before leaving, and Marin was still half asleep on the couch, exhausted from feeding the baby every 2 hours. Odette stood in the kitchen stirring tea she had not offered to anyone else. She watched me lace my boots and said, "I always seem to find a way to leave when things got hard." I swallowed my answer, kissed my wife, and left because duty does not wait for family drama. I remember thinking the sunlight made everything look hopeful. I had no idea that by noon, my home would feel like a crime scene. During a break, I checked my phone and saw 6 missed calls from our neighbor, Mrs. Noorani. Then came the photo. The crib was outside, one rail cracked, the mattress folded beside it, Sienna's tiny yellow blanket hanging over the edge of the dumpster like a surrender flag. Under the picture, Mrs. Noorani had written that Odette had carried it out while Marin was sleeping, saying cheap things brought cheap luck. For a moment, the training field went silent around me. I could still see soldiers moving, hear commands in the distance, but inside me something had gone cold and still. I called Marin first. She answered, crying so hard she could barely breathe. She had woken to Sienna crying in a laundry basket lined with towels. Odette had told her the crib was unsafe, ugly, and embarrassing, and that if I could not buy a proper one, the baby should not sleep in my little homemade project. I remember gripping the phone until my knuckles hurt. My daughter had been taken out of her bed and placed in a basket like an afterthought. My wife had been humiliated in her own home while recovering from childbirth. And I was 30 miles away, wearing a uniform that suddenly felt heavier than armor. My squad leader, Lieutenant Cashin Bexley, noticed my face before I said a word. He was not a loud man, but he had the kind of calm that made people tell the truth. I explained what had happened, trying to keep my voice steady and failing. I expected him to tell me to handle it after drill, to remind me that family issues had to wait. Instead, he looked at the picture, looked back at me, and said no newborn in his soldier's family was going without a safe place to sleep in broad daylight while the rest of us stood around pretending discipline meant silence. Within an hour, everything began to change. Lieutenant Bexley spoke to the commander, and I was released early with 2 other soldiers who volunteered before I even asked. Sergeant Havel Ortiz drove his pickup, and Specialist Renata Pike sat beside me holding a new crib box we had bought from a store near the base. I tried to tell them I would pay everyone back, but Havel only said some debts were not meant to be collected. As we drove under the hard afternoon sun, fields flashing by the windows, I stared at that unopened box and felt shame pressing against my ribs. A father should provide. A father should protect. But sometimes protecting starts with accepting help. When we reached the apartment, Odette was standing outside with her arms crossed as if she had been waiting for an audience. The broken crib was still near the bins. Marin was upstairs with Sienna, and Mrs. Nurani stood by her door with tears in her eyes. Odette began speaking before I reached the sidewalk, saying she had done what was necessary, saying the crib was a hazard, saying my pride mattered more to me than my child. But this time, I did not argue. I walked past her, lifted Sienna's blanket from the trash, and held it against my chest. That tiny piece of fabric smelled faintly of milk and baby lotion, and it nearly broke me. Lieutenant Bexley arrived a few minutes later in his own car. I had not known he was coming. He stepped into that bright courtyard with the quiet authority of someone who had seen enough cruelty disguised as concern. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply asked Odette whether she had removed a newborn's approved sleeping space without the parents' consent. Odette's face changed then, not because she felt sorry but because she realized the room had grown larger than her. There were witnesses now. There was accountability standing in daylight, wearing polished boots. Inside the apartment, Marin sat on the couch holding Sienna against her chest, her eyes swollen, her hair tangled, her whole body trembling with the exhaustion of someone who had been made to feel powerless for too long. I knelt in front of her and apologized, though I knew I had not thrown the crib away. I apologized for every time I had stayed quiet to keep peace, while she paid the price for that peace. She cried harder then, and I understood that sometimes silence can feel like abandonment, even when it is born from patience. The officer did not come inside to control our family. He came to make sure a child was safe and a soldier's household was not being destroyed by someone who thought cruelty became wisdom with age. He helped document the damaged crib. Mrs. Nurani gave a statement. Sergeant Ortiz and Specialist Pike carried the new crib upstairs. In the middle of our small living room, with sunlight pouring through cheap blinds, 3 uniformed people assembled my daughter's bed while my wife watched like she was seeing kindness return piece by piece. No speech could have meant more than the sound of screws turning, wood fitting into place, and Sienna breathing softly in her mother's arms. Odette's anger became panic when Marin finally stood up. My wife was not loud. She did not insult her mother. She simply said that anyone who could throw away a baby's safe bed to punish the baby's father could not stay in our home. Odette looked at me as if I had engineered the moment, but I had not. For the first time since giving birth, Marin chose herself and our daughter without asking permission from the woman who had raised her through criticism and called it love. That evening, under the same daylight that had witnessed the damage, Odette packed her suitcases. She cried, but the tears did not soften the truth. Some people cry because they are hurt, and some cry because they have lost control. Marin hugged Sienna and looked out the window while her mother left. I thought she would collapse when the door closed, but instead she exhaled so deeply it seemed years of fear left with that breath. The apartment felt poor, messy, crowded, and finally peaceful. Weeks passed. The new crib stood beside our bed, but I kept one rail from the old crib in the closet. Not because I wanted to remember the pain, but because I wanted to remember the lesson. Love is not proven by what we endure quietly. It is proven by what we protect loudly when silence becomes dangerous. Lieutenant Bexley checked in twice, not as an officer intruding, but as a human being who understood that service members carry battles home that never appear on any report. Sergeant Ortiz dropped off diapers once and pretended he had bought the wrong size for his nephew. Specialist Pike sent Marin a message saying strong mothers are allowed to need help. Months later, Odette wrote a letter. Not a perfect apology, but the first honest thing she had ever given us. She admitted she had been cruel, jealous of Marin's new family, and terrified of becoming unnecessary. Marin read it 3 times before saying forgiveness did not mean immediate access. That became our new rule. Love could knock, but it could not barge in. Apologies could open doors slowly, but they could not erase locks. Sienna grew. She learned to roll over in that crib, then stand holding its rails, then laugh whenever I came home in uniform. On her first birthday, the apartment filled with sunlight again, but this time it felt different. Marin placed a small cake on the table, Mrs. Noorani brought homemade sweets, and the soldiers who had once carried a crib box up our stairs came by with gifts wrapped badly and hearts wrapped beautifully. Odette was not there, but a card from her was. Marin opened it after everyone left. Inside was a simple note saying she hoped one day to be the kind of grandmother Sienna deserved. Marin cried, and this time her tears did not come from fear. Near the end of that long first year, I realized the crib had become more than a bed. It became the place where our family learned boundaries. It became the symbol of strangers stepping in when relatives failed. It became proof that a father's worth is not measured by the price tag on what he provides, but by the love, labor, humility, and courage he brings home. I had thought I failed because I needed help, but maybe the real failure would have been refusing help while my family suffered. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes families should protect instead of wound, and subscribe to Silent Dad Stories for more emotional stories of courage, healing, and quiet love. Special request: comment "A child deserves peace" if you believe every baby deserves a safe home and every parent deserves respect. That bright day began with a crib in the trash and a mother crying over her newborn, but it ended with a new bed, a stronger marriage, and a home where kindness finally had room to breathe. And every time I saw Sienna sleeping safely beneath the afternoon light, one tiny fist curled beside her cheek, I remembered that sometimes angels do not arrive with wings. Sometimes they come in dusty boots, pickup trucks, neighborly courage, and the steady voice of an officer who refuses to let cruelty win.